Well, children are back to school this week for term 3, but is it for education or indoctrination? And is it just the Ministry of Education that's confused? Let's check it out. So, a couple of days ago, the Ministry of Education in New Zealand Government Department, who oversees the education of your children, posted some images to their Instagram account. And this was the first one, and it said, today's assignment, use inclusive language when talking about periods. Transgender, non-binary and intersex people, women, the list of people who menstruate is longer than you may think. The way we talk about periods can be isolating for people who don't identify with female labels or languages. Okay, and then a few more images. Avoid, be conscious of using the words women or girls exclusively when discussing periods. Instead, say people who menstruate, people who have period, or menstruators. Avoid or be conscious of referring to period products as feminine hygiene products or women's health. Instead, you should say period products, menstruation products, or usernames for the specific products you're referring to, such as pads, tampons, etc. And then finally, normalize using gender-neutral language. It's kind and respectful, and what if you make a mistake? Well, correct yourself, don't make it a big deal, and try to do better next time. Yes, that's the Ministry of Education. You know, it's fascinating and also disturbing how the previously sensitive issue of menstruation is now being used as a tool for pushing radical gender theory. And of course, we highlighted the recent example in our Family Matters episode where Clara, she highlighted how outdoor adventure and activities were using a curriculum masked as helping girls deal with their periods while in the outdoors, which is, a good issue to cover, but using it as a tool to push radical gender ideology on children starting as young as 9. It's a disturbing analysis, and if you haven't watched it yet, go to our website. It's under Family Matters videos. Now, Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, has also joined the confusion of our Ministry of Education. And here's their before and after definition of a girl. So there we are. We've got a female child from birth to adulthood, but that has just been changed. And it now says a female child from birth to adulthood. But the definition of girl can also be a person whose gender identity is female. A person whose gender identity is female. So the dictionaries are confused. Now, we're supposed to trust the World Health Organization as well. Ooh. But based on recent events around abortion and gender, that trust is quickly disappearing. The World Health Organization, they've just announced this month that it's updating the manual on gender mainstreaming, claiming that gender identity exists on a continuum and that sex is not limited to male or female. Now, the manual was last updated in 2011, and WHO is updating it in light of new scientific evidence and conceptual progress on gender, health, and development. Well, let's just have a quick look at what it says. It says the review and update process will build on extensive work already featured in the manual. It will focus on 1, updating key concepts around gender, 2, highlighting and expanding on the concept of intersectionality, which looks at how gender power dynamics interact with other hierarchies of privilege or disadvantage, resulting in inequality and differential health outcomes for different people. Intersecting factors include sex, ethnicity, race, age, class, socioeconomic status, religion, language, geographical location, disability status, migration status, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, and political situation. And number 3, going beyond binary approaches to gender and health to recognize gender and sexual diversity, or the concepts that gender identity exists on a continuum and that sex is no longer limited to male or female. Notice the focus on intersectionality between different identity categories with a focus on power dynamics, which of course has its roots in Marxist feminist scholarship. And similarly, its focus on going beyond binary approaches to gender and health to recognise gender and sexual diversity. It doesn't appear to be open to discussion or critique. And this all originates in the work of activist groups and largely unaccountable human rights experts that often share close ties with these groups, all of which are funded by a minority of wealthy donor countries and billionaire philanthropists, like, for example, Bill Gates and other philanthropists, George Soros. The WHO's politicization of social issues has accelerated in recent years, and it released a radical update to its abortion guideline, calling for the removal of all barriers, including conscientious objection, to accessing abortion for any reason. And once again, funding was provided by those pro-abortion activist groups. The World Health Organization has once again signaled its willingness not to follow the science, nor the consensus of the governments that provide its mandate, but rather it follows the most radical positions of extreme gender activists. You know, I think WHO should be treated with the utmost caution, just like the Ministry of Education, or should that be the Ministry of Indoctrination? Now, just one more clip before we finish for today. The problem with this whole debate around gender is that if you raise the biological and what I call the truth side of the transgender issue, you're accused of transphobia and hate crimes and causing people to self-harm. And this was a classic example just recently where University of California at Berkeley Law Professor Kiara Bridges, she appeared at a hearing held by the Senate Judiciary Committee to examine legal concerns following the Supreme Court decision, that excellent one that overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, apparently abortion is a woman's rights issue, isn't it? Women's rights, apparently. But is it? Check out this exchange.
Mr. Chairman, thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Before I want to visit with you, Ms. Maskey, but before I do, I just want to clear one thing up. Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get pregnant.
So you are denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this, where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Okay, yeah, well, Berkeley law, maybe that's a good place to avoid. You know, if you suggest that only women can get pregnant, something acknowledged since time began, then you are the problem, a big problem, according to this academic. And you can see where the confusion has started, woke academia, and now it's in our schools. Make sure your children know the truth.